Hello, everyone, and welcome to Projectkin and a very special program that we have today. It's part of a two-part series we have on getting your stories published. Now, we came across this because a number of our members had told us that they're thinking about how they might publish their stories, but very confused by all the different options available today. It's kind of a mess. In the old days, I suppose one would go to a local printer and say, hey, can you make me 100 copies of these, or can you introduce me to an agent that can get me a real publisher, or that kind of thing. Today's world is much more complicated than that, and confusing, because there is such a thing as private publishing and public publishing and hybrid publishing, and who owns what and where and how. So we decided to create a pair of events. First, in a sense, actually going back to our last project recipe with Catherine Graven, which is currently available as a recording as a project recipe, we had an experienced journalist and published author, published memoirist in Catherine Graven, talking about her next book. In that sense, she was a published author and talking about that process, but that triggered this whole discussion that's led to these two special events. This one, part one, is about why and what are the options in going about publishing. Our next session in a week on May 1st will focus on the other part, the practicalities of how to go about getting your story published. And I'm just going to say story there because it can take any number of different forms. Our speakers today include two wonderful Projectkin members who have been contributing to content now since our very beginning and even before, as my previous startup, Ponga. So our lead speaker today is Karen Ray of rememberingthetime.net. Karen has been a memoir coach, working with a coterie of writers in the New Mexico area, in helping them get their stories done and published. And she is accompanied today by Kerri Carney, who has been a speaker for us on a couple of our project recipes and now a series of our Members Corners posts, talking about actual projects that she has done with her own family, including a special e-learning book that she wrote for her daughter and all about what and why and how. And then more recently, a 5-generation family cookbook, which was a very special project. And I'd encourage you to go back and take a look at all of those. And at the conclusion of this event, as for those of you who are new to Projectkin, we do a little thing in that we try to keep these recordings to just an hour and then end the recording. But you are all very welcome to stay. If you have to go, we get it. But you're also very welcome to stay and continue the conversation for another 30 minutes. We call that our after party. So with that, let me pause and invite Karen to take it away. I will be here chatting with you in the chat. Go ahead and post questions there, and I will keep an eye on them and queue them up for Karen and Kerri so that they don't have to get distracted with the noise of all of that. And again, we will conclude all of this with detailed notes that circulate with the recording. If you aren't already a Projectkin member, I do suggest you pop over to projectkin.org and drop your email address. That will ensure that you will get the recording just as soon as it's available, probably about 2 or 3 hours after the program concludes. So with that, let me turn it over to you, Karen. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am so glad to see you. Kerri and I have been looking forward to this, and thank you, Barbara, for handling all this and facilitating it. Very exciting. These are the types of questions and communications that we get all the time. And so you are not alone in wondering, why a book and what kind for this session, and then how to make that happen in our upcoming second session. So as Kerri and I were talking and planning about how to do this, we decided that we would keep it fairly conversational. We're both kind of low key persons, and this is going to be a back and forth conversation. Kerri may take the lead on some of these topics. I may on others, but we want to talk you through sort of the thought process behind this and the motivation. And so we'll bounce back and forth a little bit, but let me get us started with just a little bit of background. Your motivation for thinking about why you might want to do a book or that type of presentation, what to do with your family history. There's lots of reasons for sharing. You might feel compelled to share important family stories and memories so that those are not lost. You might be wanting to write your story or put it in some more permanent form to gain some insight into your family's history. What makes you unique, the struggles, the perseverances, the life lessons that you've learned. Others of you may have crossed with historical events, and there's that intersection where you have experienced something that is going to be written up in history books later, or maybe a snapshot of your community, what it's like to grow up on a farm or a ranch, in a certain neighborhood, in a big city, perhaps. Connecting those generations is really at the root of why we share family history and the importance behind that. And I like to say, it's really all about putting leaves on the family tree and making those stories come alive and sharing those in ways that are appealing and consumable for those that we want to read this and learn. So, Kerri, do you have anything else you want to add to that as we kind of get started here?
I would just say I'm really excited to be here with all of you to talk about this topic. There are lots of reasons why you might want to do a book, and I'm hoping today you'll see that any scope and any purpose and a lot of different formats can work for you. It's just all about thinking through what you want to accomplish with your project.
Yeah, that is great. So give yourself the time, as Kerri's saying, to consider what your purpose is, what you would like to accomplish with this, because that will inform what type of book,
Mhm.
why a book, and you need to have that pinned down a little bit. So we want to say that this type of project is doable for anybody, no matter your budget, no matter how much material you have or how little you have. If it's sparse, we're going to talk about some ways to flesh that out. It can be professionally curated and bound so that it looks like something you would find on the shelf at Barnes and Noble or purchase off of Amazon. It could be something like, I'll show you an example here, like this little book that's coil bound. You may have some of these on your shelf as well, and it's short. It's kind of a snapshot overview that might represent a couple hours worth of conversation with someone and the best of their stories. You may have, like me, have been the recipient of a few binders of mimeographed, remember those, or photocopied pages in a notebook, and it's just jammed full of wonderful stories, information, clippings. It's sort of this hybrid, low-tech scrapbook and family memory, and those are precious. If you have those, you have an excellent start towards your version of a book going forward. So what kind of a book and why? One way that you could approach this is to do a full-length book. These often involve lots of oral history interviews. They can be research-based. You might have something that is gaining ground is really what I like to call a family memoir. So it is both your story and your interpretation of a family history. And I really like that term to encompass this hybrid beast that is part of our story. So you want those, if you're looking at a full-length book, one thing to keep in mind is you want to try to convert what may be Rubbermaid tubs, cardboard boxes, bookshelves full of information in this massive quantity into something that is a consumable form. You want to think about, how could I curate this so that the people that I want to read this will find it easy to pick up and read. And some of those types of projects are letter based. They can be long books there that have an accumulation of letters and the authors weaving together of those letters into family memory. So it's a combination of, I think, narrating and including letters from other family members, and you as an author making sense of those. Um, it can be something short like that. This particular project was a second project that I did, that was very narrow focus. And so this lady, this author, had done a memoir, and then in rummaging around in the top of a closet, found a ribbon wrapped package of letters that her mother had saved. And so she said, she called me up from Santa Fe, 5 hours north of me, and said, "Oh, you'll never believe what I found. I need to do another story about this." And so a narrow focused book, also letter based, that tied together family members' experiences during World War II, became an additional part of her family history. So you don't have to do just one. You can do something broad, and then you can pick something that is very niche based as well. Perhaps even a different type of format, like Kerri's cookbook, or a children's book, something like that. Let's see, Kerri, before I jump to another part here, do you want to add anything on that full length section?
Yeah, I will add just very briefly. I have been in multiple conversations recently. You know how things ebb and flow. And I've been in multiple conversations recently with individuals that I've been encouraging to write down their stories. And some of them are in their 80s. And so, as a family storyteller, I am fearful that something's going to happen to them. And that whole memory and knowledge of those generations of the family are going to disappear with them. And so I have been in multiple conversations recently, and the resounding sort of thing that I hear in terms of resistance to doing this type of work hasn't been the skill ability to do it. It has been the who cares? Why does my story matter? Which is heartbreaking to me because every story matters. And I hate to see family history lost. And so while I know that, especially when you're talking about the full length books, like what Karen has just been talking about, it can feel like a very overwhelming undertaking. I just really encourage all of you to think about how the lives that you've lived and the things that you know um, will matter to your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, and someday, if you record them, to your great great grandchildren. Otherwise, family history is lost. And so I just really, as we dive into the details here, want to encourage all of you to just find a project that you feel like you can take on and find well, and if you've read Karen's little quick start guide, which I did, she talks a lot about finding your why. And that is something that I think is critical for all of us. So don't look at this as, oh, I have to do this entire family book of all these generations and it has to be 200 pages long. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. You can do this in bits and pieces that feel much more doable to you. Now, if you want to do full length, you go. I mean, that'd be great. But I know a lot of people get really overwhelmed by the whole idea of that.
Oh, I'm so glad you made that point, Kerri. And we're going to dive into that just a little bit more, in some ways that you can do that on a bits and pieces type scale that is a lot more manageable. But before I leave this full length topic, I wanted to emphasize Kerri's point that it doesn't have to be a huge book. It can, but also that phrase which she has heard and I have heard endless times of, I don't have a story. It's just an ordinary life. Let me show you a couple things where ordinary turned extraordinary. So here are two books here. This one here was written by a woman who came from a Jewish, long time, way back to France, family history. became a Christian later in her life, struggles with MS, with mental illness, and was a counselor and a fine artist. There's a lot of ordinary in here, as well as some extraordinary experiences that developed her perseverance and her life skills to survive. So that's an example. This other one right here, and some of the reasons these are thick, let me show you, is because they've got a lot of photos in there. Did you know you can include photos in your stories as well, and they become a priceless part of your history telling? That a picture is worth 1,000 words is so true. So these books can be fleshed out with photos to help tell your story as well. But this one, also, a lot of ordinary in here. I did not have the experience of Norma growing up at the beginning of the civil rights era with a Black dad and a white mom that met in Germany in the military, fell in love, and her mother was swing dancing and did not know she was pregnant the day that Norma was born, which is just a funny story and just a, that who does that happen to? But it did for this family. So Norma's story, which is a lot of the what was ordinary for her, and then continuing to give snapshots of, all right, as she grew up, what was life like? She married. We get a sense of place in growing up on the Monterey Peninsula, what that was like in early days of California. Not show business, but working in a family business, um, cleaning restaurants and doing the after parties for celebrities, that type of thing. It was an ordinary life. Growing up, her stories can she wanted to share this perseverance with her children that have a very different experience, and her grandchildren to know. And she made a promise to an early English teacher that someday she would write her story, and she did. So there's lots of reasons to turn what I really harp on over and over, that beautiful ordinary. That is what our families want to hear. What are the games that you played? What kind of things did grandma cook? What was it like growing up in this place? And what was your first car? Those types of things that we talk about at family meals, at holidays. So, on that note about full length, let's dial that back a bit and talk about some ways that you can either come up with a full-length book or think small and build this like Legos and create something beautiful that serves your family well. So I'm going to turn it over to Kerri to talk about some family collaborative type books that you might create. So Kerri, take it away.
Okay, before I take it away to collaboratives, I want to add one thing to what Karen has been talking about, just sort of as an example of, in my case right now, a younger generation who really wants this information. And Karen and I have been talking about this project. My parents will turn 84 this year. And my dad came from a less than ideal childhood that was really broken into a before and after by the loss, well, the leaving of a parent that threw the family into pretty significant poverty. My mom was the homecoming queen in the same town. So Karen and I have talked a little bit about that. So it sounds sort of like, the Hallmark movie type of thing, but that was really their lives. He was in deep poverty. She was the homecoming queen. She was encouraged to go to college. He was strongly discouraged from going to college because he was supposed to take over the family farm. They married, uh, began a life that was a struggle, honestly. And that continued kind of through my, I would say, mid-childhood years. My dad went on to get not only the first degree in his family, but a doctorate, and established a career. My mom chose to be a stay-at-home mom. and raised the family while he chased, the career and the financial support of the family. They are celebrating their 65th anniversary in June, and they are beginning to have some health, issues. They have amassed, from what feels like to me, a significant wealth that will pass on to generations. And yet, I know that even my sister and I don't really know all of the struggles and sacrifices they had to make to amass that wealth. And our children know nothing. And I really feel like, as a parent, I don't want my children to inherit any sort of wealth without understanding the journey to getting there. And so that is a full length piece that I'm very much hoping my parents will agree to work with Karen on, for her to bring it to life for them. And so again, and I apologize if I'm ad nauseum, but I just want to continue to say that even if you don't think that you have the story, the generations after you may very much want those stories as a part of the family history. So family collaboratives. So my experience with the family collaborative, and you can see me talk about this on a different Projectkin piece, but I did this cookbook for my youngest child, and it worked across, well, it has recipes across 5 generations. I led the charge on it, but of course, it had to have other family members that collaborated with me in order to really bring it to fruition. So I'll talk about why I did this sort of in our next piece that talks about kind of a niche area of doing family books. But what I do want to share about the collaboratives that I really learned is that some of my family members were excited from the very beginning, and they were willing to hop in and create and contribute whatever. Other family members, not so much. I had a cousin that was cleaning out his parents' belongings because they had both passed. That I said, "Can I just come out with a scanner? I won't remove anything, but can I just come out and scan things?" No. So I had quite a range of, "Oh, that's so cool," and "No." So, and everything in between. Now, what ended up happening is that those of us who wanted to be involved in it, I coordinated everything. People contributed their stories, they contributed their recipes, they contributed their photos, and I curated the book and put it together. But I had a lot of family members that got involved in helping to find things. I had some family members that contributed text to the book. I had my mother's cousin that I've met one time in my life that's out in Boston, who offered to proofread the entire book, which just was such a gift. And his daughter, whom I've never met and had no ties with, who has an interest in family history. I mean, who knew? And so she ended up with a copy of the book, and she's already sent me material for the second edition. And my mother's cousin and his daughter, now we're in contact with each other. That would never have occurred if we had not come together around doing this family project. And so Barbara knows from talking to me before that I've just been fascinated at the ties that have been created and the ties that have been affirmed through collaboratively exploring our shared family history. Now, here's the funny part, you guys, is once the cookbook came out, all of a sudden, some of those family members who didn't want to get involved wanted copies of it. And so I have included them by saying, here's how you get a copy. And I'm already gathering stuff for a second edition. Like, the opportunity's not gone. Send me your stuff. I'll hold on to it. And when I get ready to do a second edition, then you'll be in the family cookbook too. And so it's been a lot of fun. I highly recommend it. It is a little bit like herding cats. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But it has resulted in some affirmations of ties and some new family ties that have been very, very special. So Karen, would you like for me to continue with the niche purpose, or did you want to talk a little bit about collaborative works that you've worked on?
I do want you to continue, but I had forgotten about one particular project that I really wanted to mention. So let me just throw in another take on a family collaborative. And Kerri's absolutely right. It's kind of like herding cats. but at the same time, you are the one that can make this happen as the project manager, and you are dedicated to doing this, and you're kind of the one-stop shop. So I heard at a different workshop that I gave on helping people get started to our genealogical society here, I wanted to pass along this tip from an older gentleman in there. He said, I think somebody popped in the chat here, you know, when you get those no's, what do you do? And Kerri addressed that as well. So
Yeah.
here's what this gentleman did. He had a family member who had had some Korean War experiences and would occasionally talk about those. But there were a couple of these stories that this gentleman wanted to include in his family history. And so his relative was reluctant to talk, not just because his answer again was, you know, it really is nothing. I don't have anything to share. So here's what my friend did. He wrote up everything that he had remembered this uncle telling him. He wrote the story. And then he said, "Hey, Uncle," I don't know if it was Jose or Bob. He said, "I was trying to remember what you said about this story, and could I just send you this and have you take a look at it, make sure I got it right?" Well, that opened the floodgates, and suddenly all the details, all the story, as this reluctant writer uncle got a hold of this and said, "Oh no, that's not right. It was this way, and you forgot to add this part." Suddenly, the story was fleshed out. The uncle was on board and excited about the project and excited about his role in it. So that's a creative way
Mhm.
to get around the reluctance that may be there as well. And one other thing before I hand it back to you, Kerri, it reminded me of a project with a family who were immigrants from Mexico, and they live in a little farming town just north of me here. And they're six kids. The parents, who mostly only speak Spanish, and my Spanish is un poquito. Their older daughter translated for me during oral history interviews, but their motivation was a lot of the reason behind Kerri's project with her parents that she's talking about as well. They wanted their kids to know what it was like to start from nothing. There is a scholarship at the university that my husband just retired to in this family's name that this family started so that other kids could go to school and find a way out of poverty with education. And so these kids, this project was privately published just for them. And on the cover is a very grainy sunrise picture of an onion field. And that is what they wanted for the cover. And their family solidarity and the meaning of that photo for them was absolutely priceless. And I love to tell their story because I sat with the five siblings that were close enough to drive in. We sat at the dining room table of one of the girls and had this hilarious, sometimes sad, but mostly quite funny, just roundtable talk as they shared memories of what it was like growing up as children of farm laborers and what that looked like, and talked about going through high school as young women and working in the onion fields and then trying to get the smell off of their hands before they went to go play baseball or go to school dance. And you can't really get rid of it. You can kind of cover it up with perfume, things like that. But they were strong, funny, insightful people, and they wanted to pass this on to their kids. So I just wanted to insert that a little bit as a family collaborative.
Mhm.
Once you get started, you're going to mostly find that people will be on board, but there's those few ideas
Mhm.
to work around it. So Kerri, back to you.
Yeah, okay. So, what I want to talk to you about now is sort of publishing books that have a kind of a niche purpose, which is kind of Karen plays much more in the full length and large projects than I do. I play much more in the kind of niche, the niche pieces that are for a very a much more narrow purpose. So to return back for a minute to this cookbook, the reason I did it is because my youngest child has no interest in family history, to be honest. And I have found throughout my mothering time with her a need for her to understand her family history. She loves to cook and has since she was a child. And so this book was actually born of as a mother trying to figure out a strategy to help her to learn her family history in a way that she was willing to approach it. And that was a cookbook for her. And so that was the whole purpose behind this. And this book is filled with family photos and family stories. And it also has the genealogy of the family. Let me see if I can find a page that actually has it. Um, well, you see it a little bit down here in these yellow circles, where embedded within the cookbook is the actual family tree that is showing the lineage back to these people. You see it here on my mother with the three. So this would be my mother, this would be me, and then this would be the daughter that I created this cookbook for. And so this book, while it was absolutely a collaborative project, it was born of my desire to help her understand her family history in a format that she would embrace. So that is kind of that one. Now, I have several others here that I pulled off of the shelves that I wanted to show you kind of some different formats. This was professionally printed, and you probably can tell by looking at it, it was professionally printed. This book, which you can tell is an older book. This one is probably 19 years old. And it was also bound, but in a very simple format. And this particular book is called Forever and Ever and Always, No Matter What. This book I wrote for my three children because my husband and I built our family through both adoption and biology. And so I wanted from very early days for them to understand how our family was built and that families are built in all sorts of fantastic ways. And so this book went onto their children's bookshelf in their playroom, and they had access to it from the time that they were toddlers. And you will see that it is very simple. I mean, this is a dedication page that is just, text. You will see here, this is clip art over here. This is actually a photo, and the text in this book is very simple for a child and also very low effort, to be perfectly honest, for me. So this is actually, those of you that are former scrapbookers will appreciate this. This is just scrapbook paper that I cut to fit the book and threw in here just to add a little bit of color to it. So this is a very simple book, and I put it all together and I printed it, and then I just took it to a bookbinder and he bound it and put a cover on the front of it. It's a children's book. This one is also a children's book done around the same time, also bound by the same person. It's different. This book I've actually done a presentation on for Projectkin, and it was for my second child who was adopted, because on all of our children, we wanted them to have a good understanding of their origin stories from the very beginning. We didn't want there to ever be a time that they discovered that they were adopted. This book I wrote, and you can see that the artwork in here has been professionally done. I hired an artist at the high school, at the local high school. I hired her, and she did the artwork for this one. And this is the one that I recently also turned into an electronic book. So it is now available both in this format and also online. Now, the thing that I want to just quickly show you that comes from these projects is, here's this box. This is an archival box, museum box for this child. And you will see that inside here is all the artwork. So I've been able to save all of the artwork that is on artboard, and it's all wrapped which there are certain people who are part of Projectkin that will be very proud of me, that it's all archivally wrapped and in an archival box, and then saved. And I'll just show you. Here's my little box, and then it's all saved for my daughter. It's stored at my office to keep it safe. So that one was a little bit more work, but again, with a niche purpose, a specific purpose to teach a child who came from difficult background, which is sort of my specialty area, her origin story. This one is yet different. You see from it, it looks more like the little books that you pick up for young children, and that's what it was intended to do. This one was printed through the Amazon service, and this is our third child's origin story, who is a biological child, and I learned a lot from not writing her story from the beginning, and that's too big of a story for now. But hers is also professionally illustrated. But it's a very simple book. This is a coated book cover to protect it. And just like my other daughter, then I have her archival book, and I also have then all of her artwork that was done by a different artist. Both daughters in separate times have decided they want to get tattoos. The last one turned 18 last week, so I don't have a lot to say anymore. Both daughters plan to get a tattoo that comes from their children's books. So I really want to reiterate that, because I didn't know what I was doing, you guys. I mean, let's just be real. I was a brand new mother. I am a writer, but definitely not in children's books. But I had a purpose. I wanted my children to understand the ways that families get made in all different sorts of ways, and how they came to be in our family in a positive way that didn't shy away from the hard facts, but wanted them to have grounding in that. And so all of these books, and I have other ones that I won't drag out here, they were on their bookshelf along with all of their other children's books, and we read them. They read them when they were older, so on and so forth. So you can see from the beginning of where I started with this book and clip art, all the way to this book that's been professionally published, that I've done the full range of how and why you produce a book. And I'll tell you, 20 years ago, we didn't have the options we have today. It's a lot easier to do it today than it was then. But again, kind of looping back to the why, why is the story important? Do you have a purpose with it? For me, I'm an educator. So most of the books that I have written have been for a purpose of educating someone or engaging someone and drawing someone in. That's just sort of my realm. But there can be a lot of other purposes for it. Now, one other thing that I want to mention that I don't have to show you, because I don't have it done, is I have a good friend who is getting married this summer in Mexico. And the only people going to it are her husband to be her and their children. Between the two of them, they have 7 children, all of them who are either grown or about, the 17 years old age, and they have 1 grandchild. And so that's who will be gathered down there. No one else is even invited. So one of the things I discovered last Christmas is that they were getting ready, she was getting ready to pull the kids together for Christmas, and they were going to make cookies together. And they were making all these different kinds of cookies. And what I learned is that there are cookie recipes that have been a part of the creation of Christmas and tradition on both sides of the family. But remember, these 7 children did not grow up together, but they're getting ready to be into a family through the marriage of their parents. And so I haven't gotten her convinced yet. This has been one of the conversations I've been in, but my intent is to do a short book, a small book, probably one like this, that has the stories and some photos from her children growing up with their cookie recipe, and then also has some photos and stories of growing up from his family with their cookie recipes. And the kids will then end up with sort of a miniature book of cookie recipes with their family traditions from both sides now brought together in one book. And then it's my hope that that will be my wedding gift, not just to the parents, but to the parents and all of the children. That will kind of be their first thing that honors both sides, but also brings them together into a single piece. And so that's really where I play in all of this, is in those kind of niche purposes that matter for human beings. That's the work that I do. And family history matters a lot for human beings. And so those are the books that I tend to lean toward. Anything you want to add to that, Karen, before I talk about the academic piece?
You bet. Uh, I lost my train of thought. As my daughter says, it fell off the track. Um, hold on just a second. Yes. So you were talking about early projects, Kerri, and niche purposes. So I wanted to show you a project that's really precious to me because it was my first one, and it is one of those simple ones. So it is a Shutterfly book.
Mm.
And so playing on the niche purpose, this older couple I was friends with, and I approached them over 12 years ago now, and I said, I want to start honoring people's lives by helping them tell their stories, and I need to practice on somebody. You all tell great stories. So, would you let me do this for you? And it's not going to cost you anything. I just need to go through the process. So, so we did that. And there we go with 2012 there. And this book is niche because it brings together, this is a second marriage. And let me find a couple parts here. So I want to show you some pictures. There we go. So I had a his, a hers, and a together, an ours as part of this. And the reason that I want to show you this, I was pulling out my hair trying to figure out how to do a text heavy book in a platform called Shutterfly, which you're well familiar with. There are easier ways to do that now, and the platforms like that have progressed as well. I got it done, and I'm totally delighted with this book, and it is a keepsake for their children as well. They both passed away. Um, I told Mike when we finished up, he said, Mike, I want to be like you when I grow up. This is, what you're passing on and your life experiences is just inspiring for me. But pointing you to something simple, you can I'll use Shutterfly just because that's what I'm familiar with and have produced some things that way. But you can gather, 20, 30 pictures, 10 pictures. You can grab some quotes, some text, some recipes. Those types of platforms will let you create a pretty inexpensive book. There's coupons all over the place that you can get to produce these. It will show you how to plug and play with your photos, your text, and really the tech is the complicated parts are taken out of your hands and let you produce something that looks quite beautiful with an array of things that help you personalize it. And you can then order multiple copies for your family as presents. And those are, as Kerri showed you and related her kids' stories, those are precious. We may underestimate while we're in the weeds of doing them just how much impact those are going to have on the people that receive those books. So when I first started in publishing, I think I was one of the last folks that was actually learning darkroom techniques before things went digital. So with the photo side of things, but then with the actual publishing and the layout, Kerri talked a little bit about hers. I can remember sitting at a drafting table with blue grid paper and glue and putting together a newsletter for a nonprofit organization right out of college. And how much that changed years later. I'm trying to keep my toddlers quiet in the background while I work with a floppy disk on this boat anchor of a computer to put together a magazine article. And now it is just seamless. In fact, it's more, the tech is changing so fast, sometimes it's hard to stay on top of it. But there are very simple interfaces for you to be able to do it yourself or get some inexpensive help and you might be surprised. Got some young people in your house. They can do this stuff with half their brain tied behind their back. Obviously, we have learned this too. I'm going to be 60 in a few months. If I can learn it, you can learn it. But if you're stuck, go get some help from someone that is working with that computer tech all the time, and they can probably save you a lot of time and headache and just sort of get you untangled. So I wanted to pop in there with that, with another option as well for actually publishing that keeps you out of the weeds, really, with something that may be a little more complicated with trying to format an entire book yourself. So definitely doable. Think small, think niche. Essay collections. I absolutely love Kerri's cookbook idea. You need to go watch her project story on that. I think Barbara will probably put a link to that in the chat box. But um, yeah, that was just what I wanted to pop in there with that. So let me hand it back to you, Kerri.
Okay. So the last thing I'm going to touch on, and this is going to be very brief, because it really is a niche area, is that I am a professor at a research university. That's my day job. And so part of the writing, I have a research line that deals with college students who come from traumatic backgrounds. So parents were incarcerated or they've been incarcerated, substance abuse, foster care, sexual assault. I mean, all the difficult topics. If you want to talk about how they relate to young people and family, I'm your girl. I do that ad nauseum all the time. So part of this family work has come together with my professional life, because I do some family research that grounds the work that I do with college students. And so I actually, Barbara, could not find the book that's my book this morning. So I pulled off the shelf. I don't know what I've done with it. It's somewhere. But I pulled this book off the shelf because I have a chapter in it. And I just want to kind of tell you what it is, because I think some of you may find it interesting. So as I said, I am a mother by both biology and through adoption. And this book is special to me because I co-wrote with a colleague of mine from Canada. I am an adoptive mother. She is a birth mother who placed her child for adoption. Not the same child. We don't share anything in terms of our children. But if you've ever played at all in the world of adoption, you know that as an adoptive mother, I was often cast as the bad person because I was taking another woman's child. And I was at the hospital for both of my children's births. And the nursing staff was particularly difficult to deal with because they felt that they were caring, of course, for this woman who was giving birth. And here was this other woman in the wings waiting to take this child. And it really comes down to a lack of understanding about why women place babies for adoption and all the complicated and layered pieces of that, and why women like me choose to adopt. And in my case, obviously, I have a biological child that was later. It wasn't because we couldn't have children, we just chose to adopt. So it's a very silenced experience as a woman to become a mother through adoption because you're kind of cast in many cases as the bad guy. Now, what I really learned is that the same is true for the birth mother. As a society, at least in North America, we really idealize the mother role. And so for a biological mother to choose to place a child for whatever reason with a different family to raise also cast them as the bad guy. And so we wrote a chapter in this book. This book is called The Mother Blame Game. And we wrote a chapter together in this book that contrasted my experience as an adoptive mother with her experience as a birth mother, and really tried to bring it up of, as women, shouldn't we all be honoring all forms of mothering? as valuable and think something positive to contribute to the health of our children and honestly the future of our society. And so this is an academic piece in which I have a chapter. I also was felled, and I mean felled badly, by postpartum depression after my child was born. I have written and published about that. And then I curated, as an editor, a co-editor with this same friend, a set of essays written by women. Well, I take that wrong. There's one, I take that back. There's one chapter in there that was done by a man. And it was about how do we position and tell our stories, the origin stories to our children whenever they're filled with difficulty. So, like my friend that was conceived by rape, that's tough. Like, that's really tough to figure out how to position that as a parent. And so we curated a book of essays written by women and one man that talk about difficult upbringings and difficult origin stories and how they have told those or struggled with those with their own children. And so like I said, I'm going to kind of end there because I know that there may not be a lot of academic researchers here with us. But it was something that Karen and I talked about that was worth just kind of mentioning as another way that family history enters into the academic research part of families and contributes and in some ways grounds some of the things that we actually do and we don't really realize is tied back to actual empirical research. So Karen, I think that is sort of my piece, and you wanted to then talk about the gathering of materials for these types of projects.
Yeah, let's just sort of wind up a little bit with gathering materials and also some alternatives to books. So, as Kerri mentioned early on, you can invite family members to contribute to your project. And we gave you a few little creative ways to get around any hesitancy, but there's a lot of info out there. So be prepared to work around. Often folks are more than happy to share with you. Ask do oral histories yourself. Turn on the recording app on your phone while you're driving around with a family member in the car.
Mhm.
Um, Pull up recipes, letters, journals, documents, research newspaper articles. Professor Google is your friend. You will find a lot there. I often add in historical details about place and history when working on projects, and especially when memories faded a little bit about what that was like. Let's see. Historical societies are another place that you can find a lot of information, ancestry, find a grave, all kinds of resources that are out there. One of your big decisions about why a book will be and how what kind of book, I guess, would be a public or private decision. So do you want to keep this in the family? Do you want to make it publicly available? Sometimes people share life experiences that are broader and they want to help others. And other times it's a sweet, very targeted project just for your family. You can do print on demand that doesn't put you out there in the Amazon worldwide sphere if you want to keep things private. You can do both versions. Printing on demand gets you off the hook from having to keep providing copies for people, and you can share that link so that you are not the shipper and can sort of just step back then. Oh, I've created this with all those hours behind the scene and let people go forward with that. Kerri and I wanted to make sure that we kind of close out with reminding you that a book is not always the answer. We've talked about all kinds of books, different ways to create them, high tech, low tech, anything in between. Those photograph notebooks are okay too. It's the things that are inside that matter, not the external. So you want to communicate whatever story of your family history, large or small, in ways that fit how your family is going to consume that. It might be well, that younger generation. Are they going to go after it in a blog form or a website? something digital that they can, an ebook that they can consume that way. So think outside of a paper
Mm.
box. I work in tech all the time, but I'm old school. I love to handle a physical book and have that on the shelf as well. But we often create ebooks and there's always, when I finish up a project, I have it's small, but on it, a big jump drive full of all of the digitized material, because going forward, the future generations need to be able to access that. It needs to be protected in ways that are going to be archived for your family. And Barbara talks a lot about that sphere of things as well, of how you can put things in a digital archive and protect that. So that is over and above my level of expertise at that, but in Projectkin, you will find many different resources and recommendations for different places you can go to store things in a digital format. Let me just look at my notes here. Makes it easy to collaborate. If you have your materials also digitized, you can share those. Um, this one of these authors, Amy Motto of the Nothing Wasted, in her process of researching her book and her family history, she discovered some family members that she'd never talked to that live in Europe, and she's now friends with them on Facebook, and they're communicating and adding to their story that way. So for those of you that are in social media space, you will often see people sharing bits of their family history, neat old photos, stories in Facebook groups or on their pages. That's fun and great, but Facebook could crash. Don't rely on that as your repository of family history. Make sure you pull those off into something that's going to be more permanent as well. So the bottom line as we kind of wrap up here, I'm looking at the clock through my little bifocals. Let's see. Bottom line is you can do this. Decide on your project, your why for sharing the story, your audience, the scope, whether it's a children's book or a cookbook or a full-length family memoir. Figure out a format that works for you, evaluate your resources, and get help where you need it. There's lots of help out there, no matter your budget. And you can definitely tackle this. The other thing that we have both kind of learned the hard way is give yourself plenty of time. Don't put yourself in hey, I
So
got a
true.
deadline to get this out as a Christmas present. You don't, if you start now, unless you do a short book, you do not have time to do that.
You do not.
So
I can tell you, you do not. Hey, Karen, I just thought of one thing I want to add, and this is going to be a preview of the next thing I'm going to pitch to Barbara, so you were all here when she first hears it. So we talked a little bit about reluctant family members, and I've mentioned that it's particularly my mother who is reluctant to get involved in doing a full-length family story. So here's what I did, and here's an idea for you guys. So both sides of my family come from a little bitty dying town in western Oklahoma, and we have generations buried in the graveyard out there. So we're coming up on Memorial Day, right? Well, my dad no longer is really where he can travel that far. And so I have offered to go with my mother out there to decorate the graves for Memorial Day, which is very much a part of the culture of that part of Oklahoma, where there is a mass movement to the graveyards around Memorial Day to decorate the graves. And so I've convinced my youngest child, who's not into family history, to also go with us. Well, the church where my parents were married were out there. Is out there. The houses they were raised in is out there. The kind of soda bar thing that they hung out at the drugstore is out there. So what my mother doesn't know yet is I've got my iPhone charged and ready to go, because she is going to be, no doubt about it, telling the stories of all these places to her granddaughter. She may not want to talk to me or Karen, but she's going to talk to her granddaughter. And so I'm going to create a niche book out of that trip of the 3 generations. And we'll be going to the museum out there that has a lot of family artifacts in it. And then the library in that city was done by an ancestor of ours. So we'll be going by there too, gathering all those stories. I'm going to record them all because she'll forget about that I'm recording once she's talking to her granddaughter. And so that's my latest manipulation. I'm just going to call it what it is, to gather family history. And so you can think about some ways that maybe you can help a generation that you want the stories from that who is reluctant, and in helping out, you can also be able to capture some of the history that you're looking for. So, Barbara, that's going to be my next pitch to you.
That's absolutely beautiful. I want to thank
That
you
is
both.
brilliant.
I want to thank you both really for a wonderful, wonderful program. And I absolutely adore the idea of starting with a conversation about, should I do a book maybe, with the why? Because it's the why about me, but it's also the why about the future generations and why anyone and who will enjoy and what we're trying to accomplish with it. So often we get into this talk, and in my world of nerdy technology, it's like, well, let's see, should I use Lulu or Amazon? No, 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 no. Back way, 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 way up and ask yourself the why. And this has just been a fabulous program. We actually have a number of questions that have come up in the discussion here. And I want to pick up one last point before we wrap this recording up and take it to our after party, which comes back to your point, Kerri, heard you loud and clear. Yes, I'd love that. But in fact, the topic of the reluctant storyteller, I think really wraps into so much of what we do, because we are here as Projectkin because we're hooked on stories, because we know they're important. What and how and everything else is part of what we do as a community here. As a matter of fact, already at projectkin.org events is next month's project recipe, which will be about the reluctant storyteller. And I've brought in a speaker who is, in fact, a performance artist out of the UK, out of North London. And she has developed a little technique, which, as you were talking, dawned on me from putting my own kids, and maybe some of you have put your kids through Montessori, and you know the concept of the prepared environment, that children run around and do their little jobs. But from the teacher's perspective and the education perspective, it's about creating the environment where what you want to have happen happens. And the story that you just told, Kerri, I think is a perfect example. It's what I used to talk about in terms of the magic of a grandchild and a grandparent, because something has to happen there. There's a time window, and the grandparent, the child's just old enough to take it. They're receptive to the story. The grandparent has an urgency, has a distillation of what's important to tell, and poof, the moment happens. I'm inspired. Thank you both so very much. Any last words, Karen?
No, it's been so much fun to have this conversation with everybody. As you can see, we all just get real enthused about it, and there's so many different things to share, and we learn and spark ideas from each other too. So thanks for coming.
Indeed. So again, I'm pausing the recording.